Okay, great. Thank you. So Marty's on. Marty, you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Thank you for joining. Okay, we're ready. Tell me when I'm gonna go, Mr. Are we good?
Live. Yes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dave Bullock, the chair of the UNC-Chapel Hill Board of Trustees. I'd like now convene an emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees that I called this morning. I would call this time the Secretary of the Board, Malcolm Turner, for a roll call because this is a Zoom meeting. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Artis Neal.
Here.
Mr. Bullock.
I'm here.
Mr. Bryan.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Dr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Codis.
Here.
Mr. McCullen.
Here.
Mr. Meekins.
Here.
Mr. Patel.
Here.
Mr. Pryor.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
I am present, and Mrs. White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I will call on Mr. Summers, the Assistant Secretary of the University, please, for a presentation of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, the agenda for today's meeting has now been posted on the trustee website, bot.unc.edu/agendas, and we would direct all trustees to review the agenda at this time. Thank you.
And just for clarity's sake, there are 2 items on the agenda. This is an emergency meeting. Only those 2 items can be considered. They are on number 5 of the open session agenda. Consideration of personnel matters: A, Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, and B, Executive Vice Provost and Chancellor's Chief of Staff. At this time, it is my duty as Chair of the Board of Trustees, my responsibility to remind all members of the board of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict of interest as required by this act. Each member has received the agenda and related information for this Board of Trustees meeting. If any board member knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter coming before the Board of Trustees at this meeting, the conflict or appearance of conflict should be identified at this time. Does any board member have a conflict? Please speak up now. Hearing none. At this time, I will move into some brief introductory remarks to cast light. I have talked to each board member individually. I want to first thank each board member for taking time out of their day, being here today. It shows fantastic support for this university that each board member has made themselves available for this special meeting, for this emergency meeting. And I want to personally thank you for your commitment to the university, and thank you for answering the phone last night when I called. Last Thursday, December 9th, this board convened a special meeting to discuss and consider certain confidential personnel matters in closed session. The board then returned to open session to vote on actions raised as to 3 personnel matters. When the board takes a final action on personnel matters, it has 2 separate and often competing legal guardrails to contend with. First, the open meetings law, which requires that certain votes be taken and recorded in open session or by written ballot outside of a scheduled meeting, as the university has done often as a matter of practice. Second, the State Human Resources Act, however, additionally mandates that the board protect confidential personnel information from disclosure. These 2 requirements do not sync up often to allow full disclosure of personnel actions at the time of a recorded vote. There are several reasons for this, and I want to outline these reasons in specificity. First, the specific nature of the personnel action is legally protected confidential personnel information at the time of the vote. Certainly, a vote in open session to reject an appointment of candidate A, for example, would violate the confidential personnel information of candidate A in that particular hypothetical. Second, the board's approval often requires further action by the university, the Board of Governors, or it may require the employee to complete the personnel action. the employee still may need to accept an appointment or approve final appointment terms, or the university may need to prepare a final human resource adjustment to the position or to the related salary items. Third, the board's personnel authorizations may require additional approvals from the system office or the Board of Governors before an appointment can be made. All three of those things may occur. All three of those things intersect with the Open Meetings Law and the State Human Resources Act. For these reasons and all others, the board has long taken steps to protect against the premature disclosure of confidential personnel information when taking votes in open session. Of course, once the personnel actions are completed and the specific information related to the action is publicly available under the State Human Resources Act, the university will release and always releases that information upon request. In certain cases, the university will announce the information publicly. This is exactly what happened last Thursday in open session. We acted to prevent the premature disclosure of confidential personnel information associated with the appointment of the provost. We knew that in the event of a positive vote, the chancellor had already asked the board and talked to the chair, myself, about needing time in order to finalize the appointment with Dr. Clemens. He then would make an announcement about the nature of the appointment. So the chancellor asked for and was granted time, brief period of time, to finalize the appointment with Dr. Clemens and the terms of that appointment. By voting in open session on a recorded roll call vote and in a manner that assured compliance with the State Human Resources Act, the board did not violate the Open Meetings Law. That said, the board has been unfairly accused of violating the law by not revealing all details about the nature of the personnel action at the time of the votes. And some have gone so far as to challenge or question the validity of our votes. Those accusations have unfairly stained this board process and this board, and has created unwarranted speculation about the validity of the appointment. For that reason, I and I alone called an emergency meeting today to immediately end any further attempts to question or challenge the validity of this appointment. One of the university's most important senior positions that needs to move forward without any lingering concerns or questions is the provost. And out of an abundance of caution and to end further allegations or questions against the validity of this appointment, I will ask that this board again consider and act on Chancellor Guskowitz's recommendation regarding the appointment for executive vice chancellor and provost. At this time, I would call on Vice Chair Pryor for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept the recommendation of the Chancellor to appoint Chris Clemens as Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill at a salary of $425,000, and to the extent necessary, to ratify the actions taken to approve this recommendation previously on Thursday, December 9th, 2022.
Do I have a second to Vice Chair Pryor's motion?
Second.
I have a second, and who is that from? Is that from Mr. Patel? Trustee?
Yes.
Thank you. I have a first and second. Is there any further discussion?
Chair Bullock, can you ask Attorney Charles Marshall just to confirm that this meeting is in compliance with the Open Meetings Law as well, just so that we've received that advice and we're clear on that?
I can. Mr. Marshall, I know that you are present. Can you confirm that we are in compliance to the best of your legal knowledge with the Open Meetings Law with respect to this meeting?
I don't want to give any legal advice or not answer any questions unless we go into closed session to talk about that. I will tell you that it is in the discretion of the chair to call an emergency meeting under the bylaws. But if you have questions about the nature of that, the basis for that, and you want my legal advice about that, we need to go into closed session.
Okay, well, I'm not going to do that. Mr. Codis, is that I'm comfortable with the fact that we are properly complying with the open meetings law. I had called this as an emergency meeting because I think that lingering concerns or questions about the validity of this appointment hinders the new provost's ability to move forward in setting up his office, and the university needs to move forward from this as quickly and efficiently as possible. This is the best and only way I know to do that.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just interject, when I was making my motion, I inadvertently said 2022 and it is 2021, obviously. So my mistake on that.
Thank you. And show that for the record corrected that the recommendation previously authorized on Thursday, December 9th of 2021.
Thank you.
Mr.
Bullock,
Codis, are you
I'm not-
satisfied?
Yeah, not really. I guess I'm not looking for legal advice. I'm just looking to confirm that we are not doubling down on something that occurred before here. I've always felt like it's the attorney's responsibility to make sure that we're in compliance with laws. I don't know why that would be a closed session requirement to talk about that. We're either in compliance or we're not in compliance.
Well, I think he stated that he wants to go in closed session to give legal advice.
So what I'm saying is I don't want to have a discussion about legal advice in open session, period. So I've made the statement that the bylaws authorize Chair Bullock to call an emergency meeting, and if in his opinion, there's an emergency. And I think that he is following that process.
Okay.
So there's a legal path in our bylaws to do that. He has used that process here. And so he's more than welcome to do that. If people have further questions about it as to legal advice, then I want to go into closed session. I'll be happy. If there's another question,
further question,
I'll take it.
if Attorney Marshall is saying that we're in compliance here and that you have the right to do that, then I'm fine. Not looking for a problem, just trying to make sure we don't have an issue.
I have no reason to believe that this meeting is not in compliance with the open meetings law.
Trustee
Perfect.
Codis, I've read it, and for what it's worth, I'm very comfortable that we are in compliance with the open meetings law.
That's all I wanted to hear. I'm good with it then.
Great. So is there any additional discussion? And thank you, Trustee Codis. Always a great question. Any other discussion? Seeing no one else with a matter for discussion, I'll call on the Secretary of the Board, Mr. Turner, for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Ardis Neal,
Yes.
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Codis,
Yes.
Mr. McCullen,
Yes.
Mr. Meekins,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
No.
I am a yes. Mrs. White,
Yes.
Chairman Bullock.
Chair is a yes. The motion passes. And so we will move to the next item on the agenda. Because Dr. Clemens has accepted the terms of his appointment with the university, and they have been freely and voluntarily shared publicly, we were free, in my opinion, to disclose them in that motion. I want to be clear on that. The other two personnel actions taken last Thursday are in a slightly different posture. We voted to authorize the proposed salary adjustments for the Hello? Okay. We voted to authorize the proposed salary adjustments for the candidates being considered for the positions of Executive Vice Provost and the Chief of Staff to the Chancellor. With this authorization, the administration could then seek any additional approvals needed to make the appointments. Those actions are not final yet, although the university previously has reported that Dr. Amy Locklear Hertel would move into the role of Executive Vice Provost, and that Dr. Christy Hurt would move into the role of Chief of Staff. Both are current employees of the university. Again, out of an abundance of caution and with the consent of both Drs. Hertel and Hurt, I will entertain a motion to once again approve the proposed salaries for the executive vice provost and the chief of staff to the chancellor positions, such that the chancellor may proceed with any additional approvals needed and the completion of the appointments. I'll call on Vice Chair Pryor for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the proposed salaries for the executive vice provost and the chief of staff to the chancellor positions, such that the chancellor may proceed with any additional approvals needed in the completion of the appointments and to the extent necessary to ratify the actions taken to approve these salaries previously on Thursday, December 9th, 2021.
Second, Trustee Davis.
I have a second. I have a motion from Vice Chair Pryor and a second from Trustee Davis to approve the motion. Are there any additional discussions on that matter?
I have a question for clarification. This is Trustee Richards. When you say to carry out the remainder of the process of appointment, does that mean returning to the board in any way? I just want to clarify that. That does not require to come back to the board for him to make these appointments.
My understanding, Trustee Richards, is that because these, and that was the reason I mentioned that they are current employees of the university. And I will thank Drs. Hertel and Dr. Hertel and Dr. Hurt for giving the board permission to discuss this. These salaries will be their ultimate salaries will eventually appear on the state employee website and roster. However, because of the nature of those salary changes, there is additional approval required from the Board of Governors. This will not be a final approval for these salaries. This is an approval from the Board of Trustees that then moves on to the Board of Governors. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion? Very good question. Thank you, Trustee Richards. Okay, hearing no discussion, I'll call on the Secretary of the Board, Mr. Turner, for a roll call vote. Trustee Turner.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Artis-Neal,
Yes.
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Codis,
Yes.
Mr. McCullen,
Yes.
Mr. Meekins,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Abstain.
I am a yes. Mrs. White
Yes.
and Chairman Bullock.
I'm a yes. Motion passes. One last note, it is up to this board to take the appropriate steps to assure compliance with the competing strands of the Open Meetings Law and the State Human Resources Act. These steps will not always look the same. And I will tell the board and the public that I don't intend to call an emergency meeting, a special meeting, every time social media or the student newspaper decides to question something, the board does. However, I do want, for a do-over. I don't want to have a do-over every time we do stuff. I mean, it's just not fair to us and it's not fair to the university because the university needs to move forward on these actions. These steps, however, will not always look the same. The board may be required to take actions in a specific way because of the nature, posture, and timing of each action, and they are often slightly different. Look, lawyers, media, and others will have different opinions as to how we should and not settle these competing standards. But ultimately, it is up to the board chair to determine the appropriate way to discharge duties on each particular action. While I am confident that we took the action appropriately last week under the circumstances, it is important to me as chair that we end any speculation as to the validity of this appointment and the salary votes. The integrity of the board, the integrity of the university is important to me. I want to call on the chancellor if he would like to make any additional remarks following my last statement. Mr. Chancellor.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bullock. And as I did announce last Thursday afternoon that I have known Chris Clemens for nearly 15 years and have worked closely with him on a range of ambitious projects to enhance the academic excellence here at Carolina. I know that he'll do an outstanding job as our next chief academic officer, and I look forward to working with Chris as a key member of our leadership team in this new role. I also appreciate the board approving my request to authorize the 2 salary actions that did require Board of Trustee approval that are related to my decision to appoint Amy Locklear-Hertel as Executive Vice Provost and Christy Hurt as my new Chief of Staff, also effective February 1, coinciding with the start date of Dr. Clemens as our next Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost. And so I just want to thank the board for approving these actions. We have a lot of momentum with several initiatives and opportunities that I am confident will turn into great successes for our campus over the next few years as we work together as a team. And I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Trustee Davis.
All right, Trustee Davis has moved to adjourn reluctantly. I heard that in your voice, Gene. You wanted to stay on the meeting. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second, Trustee Patel.
I have a second for Mr. Patel. Always love the artwork too, Trustee Davis. So I have a motion and a second to that motion. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mrs. Artis-Neal,
Yes.
Mr. Bryan,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Codis,
Yes.
Mr. McCullen,
Yes.
Mr. Meekins,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mr. Richards.
Yes.
I am a yes. Mrs. White,
Yes.
Chairman Bullock.
I want to thank the board before I vote again for your commitment to the university and your attendance at this meeting. And I am a yes. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We stand adjourned.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
And
Christmas.
go Heels. We got a game tonight.